This is Daughter of Christ. Muslims often tell us that one of the reasons they reject the Bible is the story it tells of Jacob wrestling with God.
Also another thing in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament mentioned that Jacob wrestled with God. And Jacob overpowered God. God is all powerful. No one overpowered him. God's all powerful.
Jacob overpowered God and won.
Yeah, won. And he said, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. He said, what's your name? He said, my name is Jacob. He said, no more name Jacob. His name is Israel.
The Muslim objection is as follows. God is all powerful, and so no one can wrestle with him and prevail. God does not enter into his creation to interact with people face to face, because God is above this. Let's look at the biblical account. Verse 25 says the man touched Jacob's hip socket and put it out of joint. So it's clear who is the more powerful one here. What ordinary human being can put a hip socket out of joint by just touching it? It is clear that God was the more powerful one in the interaction. He had the power if he wished to overcome Jacob physically, and he had the power to bless him. If, for example, a father is wrestling with his small child and allows that child to overpower him, would anyone say the child is more powerful? So to say the passage suggests that God is not all-powerful is not only deceptive, it is moronic. But it's something we've come to expect from Dawah gangs. We can preach about the beautiful symbolism of this, how God is a personal God who interacts with us personally and closely, how God allows us to wrestle with him. We wrestle in prayer and fasting, and he blesses us. But sadly, the beautiful symbolism is wasted on the blind eyes of Muslims who insist that God is above it, that he did not really wrestle with Jacob. So to those Muslims I say, if that's your position, then throw away the Quran, because your own Quran approves of the story. The Lord said to Jacob, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." The name Israel, Israel in Hebrew, means one who has struggled and prevailed with God. Now Muslims, if you're so against this story being true, as if the story never happened and God was above coming to wrestle with Jacob, then that would make the name Israel blasphemous, because it means one who struggled with God in Hebrew. If the Quran was against that story, it would never use the name that came out of it. Oh, but it does. Look here, Surah 3, verse 93. It says, "All food was permissible to the children of Israel, except what Israel forbade for himself." Wow! This person here called Israel forbade some food for himself, according to the verse. Notice here Allah calls Jacob Israel, the very name that came out of the story Muslims deny. Then you must condemn the Quran. Also look here, Surah 19 verse 58. It says, "The descendants of Abraham and Israel." There's a person called Israel. He means Jacob. And there has never been any doubt in the mind of any Muslim commentator who Israel was. They all call him Jacob. Everyone knew that Allah meant Jacob when he said Israel. But why does Allah use the name Israel to refer to Jacob? Why not just call him Jacob? He was just as well known by that name. The fact that Allah uses the name Israel, which means one who struggled with God, means one of two things. One, Allah knew where the name came from and approves of the story. Or two, he would not approve of a story like this, but he did not know the Hebrew meaning of the word, because the writer of the Quran did not know Hebrew. He only knew Arabic. I personally think Muhammad did not know the Hebrew meaning. He did not know that Israel meant to struggle with God and prevail. He must have heard the name from the Jews, but did not know what it meant. Else he would not have put it in the Quran. But if you're a faithful Muslim who believes the Quran is from the real God, you can never believe that the source of the Quran did not know what the Hebrew word meant, because God knows what words mean in all languages. So your only option is to believe that Allah knew where the name came from and what it meant in Hebrew, and so he approves of the story by using it and by calling his beloved prophet Israel, one who has struggled and prevailed with God. Why else would he call him that if he did not believe the story was true? So Muslims, you can no longer say the story did not happen, or it will be going against Allah. As the Quran gives a nod of confirmation to the story, Muslims must accept that Jacob did wrestle with God, and he prevailed. Let's take a closer look at the identity of the angel of the Lord who wrestled with Jacob, whom Jacob identified as God, saying, "For I have seen God face to face." Sadly, the well-detailed, well-explained Quran has zero details on the whole thing, so for that, we go to the only source that can shed any light here, the Bible. The angel of the Lord is actually mentioned several times in the Old Testament. Here in Hosea 12 verse 4, it identifies the angel of the Lord as God. In 1 Kings 19, that angel of the Lord comes to Elijah and speaks to him, and here he is identified as the word of the Lord. In John 1:1, the word of the Lord is confirmed as God, as it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." It is that word, in verse 14, that became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his